Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 132. I have Andrew Bernstein on for the second time. We're going to talk about some of his recent books. He's written a novel about called Reckoning, and he's also written a book about a fiction book about racism. This is and I recently got to talk to him at the SharCon event in Charlotte. So it was good to get back here and see him again. How are you, Andrew?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Yeah. And so so you've been involved with objectivism since the 80s or 70s, I believe. And
well, going back even a little bit further, when I was a high school kid, I had a teacher in 1968 who was an objectivist and introduced me to Ayn Rand's books. And I read Ayn Rand's novels then, and I knew right away. The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged convinced me not only that Ayn Rand was a literary genius, that these were great novels, but that her philosophy would be tremendously positive and life-enhancing, both in the life of an individual and in the life of society more broadly. So I would say 1968, that far back.
Yes, 1968, a very critical year for objectivism. But yes, yeah. So you've been looking into this issue, the issue of a resurgence of a possible race war. I think we can say we've kind of seen this coming for quite a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think going back, there's a couple of strands here. First of all, I think the good news is, despite Joe Biden and other people on the left hollering about white supremacists as the gravest terrorist threat, the good news is that that kind of heinous white racism, that violent white supremacist movement that tortured the black community and some white Americans as well. Like 100 years ago during the Jim Crow era was very prevalent. Yes. According to The Atlantic, the white population 100 years ago was like 95 million, and there were several million members of the KKK. Whereas today, according to the Anti-Defamation League, the white population in the United States is some 234 million, and the Klan membership is in the thousands. And we could say the same for the American Nazi Party and most of these white supremacist movements. They're relatively small. In fact, they were marginalized and generally despised community amongst 230 odd million white Americans. So that form of racism is mercifully dying. But you see on the political left this hatred of white people that's just been growing. At least 20 years ago, Harvard Magazine did an essay titled "Abolish the White Race." And you just see it. You see leftists spew out this hatred constantly. A couple of years ago, there was a New York City psychiatrist. It's not funny, I shouldn't have laughed. Speaking at Yale University, who said that she fantasizes about shooting white people in the head. And you get, there's that Rutgers professor a year or so ago, so we got to take white people out. What's really disturbing, Chris, is that not only you have all this virulent hatred, this anti-white racism being spewed out by the left, but I don't see the intellectual pushback that this warrants. Responsible people who have a public voice should be speaking up and speaking out, saying that's pure, unadulterated racism. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. It's and so on and so forth. That's disturbing. One, that this kind of anti-white racism is prevalent, and two, that there's not much intellectual blowback, for it. Anyhow. So woke culture, and by woke, I think what the woke mentality claims to be the realization that one, the United States in 2023 is still systemically racist like it was in 1923, which I think is false. Obviously, this is not the Jim Crow era anymore. And two, deeper than that and worse, is that white people are inherently, inveterately racist. That's like kind of hardwired into our DNA. And where does that come from? Well, it's that woke mentality comes out of the universities, and you said we could see it rising for a while. Yes, the resurgence, not the resurgence, but the emergence of postmodernism in the universities, in the schools of education, in the school system, in the humanities divisions of our universities. And postmodernism means basically Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Richard Rorty, philosophers like that. Their mentality, they're Marxists on steroids. Marx divided society into the oppressor and the oppressed class, and defined it narrowly in economic terms. The rich exploit the poor. Well, the postmodernists, no, it's much broader than that. The whites oppress the non-whites, and the males oppress the females, and the straights oppress the gays, and so on and so forth. And we have to stand up for the oppressed against the oppressor. So the woke mentality, so these poor kids come through the school system, they come through the universities, they're indoctrinated with this, they graduate. Some of them go into corporate America, and you see the corporations, Disney, Coke, and Budweiser. You see a number of major corporations, permeated with this. So the left is pushing a virulent anti-white racism, and one of the questions that we need to raise is why. What's the end game here? What's the goal of this? Obviously false. The essence of racism is to claim that your moral character is hardwired into your biology. And that's exactly what they claim, that white people are inherently racist by virtue of being white. Well, that claim in itself is racist as hell. And so, the question is, why are they pushing this? Where do they want to go? Where are they heading with this? What's the goal? And I think that's an important question that needs to be raised.
Yeah, I just say, because we've seen this for a while, I think it was back in 92, I read Thomas Sowell's book, Inside American Education, and he was writing about this stuff in 92. And, Thomas Sowell, of course, is African-American, and he's written, 50 books probably by now.
Dozens.
Still writing books past the age of 90, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's an American treasure.
Yeah. And, and he was a former Marxist himself, and really didn't really have a lot of given to him, but worked his way up and has become, really
and by the way, I just want to put in a plug for Thomas Sowell, who I've got a dozen or more of his books in my personal library, and I've learned an enormous amount from him. I think Thomas Sowell should be given a Nobel Prize in economics for lifetime achievement. I think he eminently deserves it. So I just want to put in a plug on your show, for that, Chris.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of things, and objectivism really rejects determinism. It says you have free will, and you can, it's up to you what you think. It's up to you what you believe. I mean, we can't really choose if we're tall or short. We can't really choose if we have blue eyes or brown eyes, but maybe that'll change too. But there are a lot of things that are our choice.
Gene splicing may make that possible, the advances in genetic engineering, advances in cloning may make that possible. I don't know. I'm just a philosopher and a writer.
Yeah, it's going to be very
scientists. Although I could comment on the morality of that. Why I think properly done, it could be a good thing. And I'm not afraid of this Frankenstein monster. Mentality.
I do follow I do. There is one lady named Carlin Borisenko that I follow, and she talks about how all this wokeness is really just another way to attack capitalism and establish Marxism. How much of that do you think is involved with this?
Oh, definitely. I think that's absolutely true, and can go back to my question of what's the end game for the left with this virulent anti-white racism that's emerged over the last 20 years. And I think there's 2 points, both of them reprehensible, but one's relatively innocuous. And the relatively innocuous one is the attempt to make white Americans feel guilty for all these alleged crimes, some of which are real, some of which are imaginary, none of which are worse than other peoples around the world have perpetrated historically, whether Asians or blacks or the Indian tribes in the Americas. But try to match Genghis Khan and the Mongols for atrocities, or just the Muslims for sheer success of imperialism, the enormous lands to the east of Arabia that they conquered 1,300 years ago and still hold in an iron grip to this day. Whereas if you're born as a Muslim, let's say in present day Afghanistan, and you want to leave the religion and convert to Christianity, that's apostasy. It's a capital offense. They'll kill you. They still hold it in an iron grip for 1,300 years. Anyhow, be that as it may, the attempt to make white people feel guilty for their successes, and part of, the relatively bad as it is, the relatively innocuous part of the goal, I think, is the push towards socialism, the push towards a massive welfare state, a massive, and make white Americans, many of whom are middle class and successful, affluent, more amenable to a massive redistribution of income. To take from the white middle class to give to the non-white members of the poverty class, or just to non-whites generally. And that includes the insanity of slavery reparations, reparations for slavery that was abolished more than 150 years ago. So this is a massive grift. As reprehensible as that is, I think that's the less evil of the two goals here. Because I was talking about the diminishment of anti-black or anti-non-white racism amongst white Americans, which is a very encouraging sign, and it's grounded in American principles of individualism and individual rights. That a person makes moral choices, and their moral character is what makes them who they are, not the race they happen to be born into. But I think remember we saw in Charlottesville, when was that, 2017, the rioting, the Klan and the American Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia. I think it was August 2017, and they had their march and their demonstration, and it ended up in riots. It's interesting. So you try to look at the numbers, and I couldn't get an exact count of how many white supremacists were there. But USA Today had a series of photographs, and the photographs, there's some evidence here. The photographs show a relatively small number of white supremacists surrounded by huge numbers of counter demonstrators. And similarly, for the 1-year anniversary, there was like fewer than 50 white supremacists and hundreds, maybe more than 1,000, counter demonstrators. They're a small number. By the way, the large, I did my homework for this Chris, when I was writing my booklet on American racism. The New York Times claims, the New York Times, such a reliable organization, right? The New York Times claims, what's that? There's a Nazi group, I forget the name of it offhand, that is the largest and most active Nazi group in the country, but then claimed they had 400 members. No, it turns out they're mistaken about that. The Aryan Brotherhood, which is a prison gang and a crime syndicate, the Aryan Brotherhood is the largest, most active Nazi organization in the country. The Southern Poverty Law Center estimates 15 to 20,000 members. Now, that's 15 to 20,000 too many, but still, we talk about 230 plus million white Americans. We've seen how marginalized these guys have become. I think the Marxist left wants to revive this. Why? Well, the Marxist left is not stupid. A lot of them are college professors and teachers and journalists and well-educated. They have to know that if you spew out this endless anti-white racism, that you're guilty just by virtue of being white. Yeah, some people will feel guilty about it and be more amenable to your welfare state redistribution of income. But they know damn well a lot of people are going to be angered by it. They're going to, the endless, white people are evil kind of thing. A lot of people are going to be angry about it. Will they join some of these miserable white supremacist organizations, as a means to protect themselves against the left or against the perceived threat of non-whites? Some probably will. And they want to encourage more white supremacists, more marches, more demonstration, more street violence, where you could have the Klan and the Nazis met head on in the gutters by Antifa and Black Lives Matter and have massive street violence. Why? Well, the goal here is to push us into communism. How do you push a freer society into totalitarianism? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to have a philosophy that's deeply entrenched in society, and the left already has that. They control the universities, they control the school system, they control the media, they control Hollywood. The leftist philosophy is already deeply entrenched. They control the intellectual culture. But the second step is you need how did Mussolini come to power in Italy in the 1920s?
Yeah.
How did Hitler come to power in Germany in the 1930s? Part of it was massive street violence. The Mussolini's black shirted thugs, Hitler's brown shirted thugs. Your massive street violence, fighting the communists and the unions in the street, endless violence, which convinced honest people that, well, maybe capitalism and Republican form of government and freedom has failed, and we need to be pushed into totalitarianism, into authoritarianism. The left already has the philosophy in place. Well, all they need is that endless street violence, and furthermore, they could use the boogeyman of the Nazis as a threat to push America into communism. And I think that's the underlying reason why they spew out this endless anti-white hatred. It's not just that, hey guys, you're going to cause a resurgence of these white supremacists. Don't you realize you're going to cause a resurgence of your enemies, and they're going to flock to Richard Spencer, and who wants a white ethno state? Yeah, they do realize it, and they do it doing it on purpose.
Andrew, what's interesting now is, if you go out to a BLM protest or anything, it's a lot of African Americans now don't want any part of this, because they know it's really, they really do heed Dr. King's message, the content of our character. And it's ultimately all these white leftists who are pushing this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they're more vocal about it than it's, Robin DiAngelo or somebody, or some of these other crazies. It's
Yeah, it definitely comes from the left, overwhelmingly from the left, and the left is largely white, for whatever that's worth. There are certainly black leftists, but most of them are white. And you're right. So one indication, summer two. By the way, before when I was talking about the white supremacists, I mentioned Richard Spencer.
Richard Spencer. I know.
Yeah. I hope I didn't say Robert Spencer, who's an expert on Islam. Richard Spencer is the white supremacist wants a white ethno state, which, by the way, I always think
he was also coming out in favor of Obamacare, by the way, too. Yeah. So
and he said he voted for Biden in the recent election. But I just want to say one thing before I go back to blacks rejecting BLM. My daughter is adopted from China, and she's going to be 21 in a few months. She is the most good-natured human being you'll ever meet. I mean, she just has such a good heart. Everybody recognizes that. But you know what? White ethno state, she won't be allowed to live there. She's Asian. Can't have non-whites live on the white man's land. How crazy that is. That all we care about is how much pigmentation people have in their skin, not what's in their character. Going back to Martin Luther King's very insightful points that he made about this. But I just want to say, regarding your point, Chris, during the summer 2020, during the George Floyd riots, I saw the Gallup poll, amongst Black Americans about, defund the police. 81% of respondents said they favored as much or more policing in their neighborhoods, as opposed to 19% who favored less. Most Black Americans are not as insane as white leftists are. They don't think that less policing is going to lead to lower homicide rates or lower rates of criminal violence, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and there's little doubt that America, at least compared to Europe and say Australia and New Zealand, does have a large portion or a large number of people getting killed by cops. I mean, although it's not nearly as bad as, say, Venezuela, but they might actually address this issue if they would paint it as it's not. I don't think police brutality is a racial issue.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
What was his name in Dallas? Tony Timpa, was that?
Yeah.
Was that white guy's name? The cops had him on the ground. They had their weight on his back, and he died.
Yeah. There's also a woman named Justine Diamond, or maybe it's who was in Minnesota, no less, and got killed by a Somali cop, and nobody said a word about it.
She was white.
Yeah, she was white. Yeah, it's like. Or Justine Damond, Damond, yeah.
Definitely happens, and I think we could train the police better. regarding this. But police brutality is, it's real, and it needs to be addressed, and I think the police can be trained better. But at the same time, it's regarding Black Americans. It's a relatively minor problem for Black Americans, because the official DOJ statistics year after year after year after year show thousands of Black Americans, generally young men, teenagers or in their 20s, murdered, homicide victims. And year after year after year, 90% of the murderers are Black criminals. It's relatively rare. I forget what the numbers were. Heather McDonald, the crime expert, gives you the statistics. It's like a Black homicide victim is like 18 or 19 times as likely to be killed by a Black criminal as by a police officer. And also, I want to give a shout out to the cops, because there's a lot of them are honest and come to work every day, and in high crime areas risk their lives to try to protect the innocent and get all this abuse from leftists. So I want to say, we support the efforts of. I'm not so insane as to think that if we defund the police, we're going to have a more peaceful world. And by the way, I want to point out, given how vicious I think the contemporary left is, they don't think so either. Rashida Tlaib not only wanted to defund the police, she wanted to eliminate it, and replace it with social workers. And Detroit is part of her jurisdiction. Does she really think that that's going to lower the crime rate? No, she can't be that stupid. She knows the crime rate's going to explode. It did. We know that. Heather McDonald's statistics, show it. But that was very predictable even before George Floyd. You're going back to Michael Brown in Ferguson. Again, the left wants that endless street violence. It helps. It helps fuel their drive towards the claim that capitalism has failed. Freedom in America has failed. We need to move towards authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's and anarcho-tyranny, as some call it. Yeah, and Heather McDonald has talked a lot about this, how they're now putting all this DEI stuff into jobs. I mean, I'm reading, for example, that there's been an increase in near misses with air traffic control, because they're not hiring air traffic controllers based on their qualifications.
Oh, good. Don't tell me that. I'll never want to fly. I'll never want to fly again.
I like flying too much, but yes, it's although some people told me that air traffic control situations have been totally messed up since the Patco strike, which was 40 years ago. But
well, the good news is a lot of times I fly out of an airport, during the daytime, and you look up in the what they call it, the big sky approach.
Oh yeah,
and there's like a big sky up there. There's not a lot of planes. So the good news is, even if some ATC guy falls asleep, it's very likely that the pilot's going to be able to avoid, hitting anything in the air. One reason why flying is safer than driving, to put it simply, is, over vast distances. I mean, is because there's far fewer things up in the air to run into than there is on the ground. And of course, pilots are much more highly trained than most drivers are. So. But that's concerning if ATC is air traffic control is now hiring on grounds other than the ability to handle multiple planes landing and taking off at the same time.
Yeah, well,
we need a lot. We may need a lot of very sharp women.
Well,
because women seem to be able to multitask, certainly better than I can, and handle if this plane's taking off, this one's landing. A lot of really sharp women, like maybe the answer to this.
Well, you have busy airports. In your case, you're from New York City. You have Newark, you have LaGuardia, you have JFK, all there fairly close together. Well, even you might even count Westchester in that too now, but
and Newark.
There's all kinds of planes going every which way.
It's concerning, which is why in any field, from A to Z, air traffic control to zoology and anything in between, you want to hire on merit, not on race, gender, but on the ability to do the job productively. MDs have our bodies in their hands. Teachers have the kids' minds in their hands. They need these jobs. air traffic control has our lives in their hands. You know, the merit matters. Race and gender in this context do not.
Yeah, and the other thing too is sometimes it ends up ends up admitting students into schools where they're more likely to fail. If you let them into MIT or Caltech, and maybe that's a little over their head. Whereas if they went to, say, I don't know, Penn State engineering, they might do just fine.
Yeah. You mentioned Thomas Sowell before. He and the late great Walter Williams, both Black Americans, both brilliant economists, wrote on the problems of affirmative action. First of all, the injustice very often to Asian kids who come in with superb scores and then don't get into Harvard or Princeton or MIT because of affirmative action programs. And then, law of unintended consequences. You bring in minority students who are good, solid students, but like you said, maybe not ready for the rigors of MIT. But if they, and flunk out or, have real problems. Whereas if they went to a good school but less demanding school, Penn State, I guess, is a good example, they could flourish. The affirmative action has done a lot of harm in different ways.
Yeah, and I don't know where. There's that thing that really Asians have been made honorary white people.
That's right. That's right.
Because they never talk about quotas for Asian Americans, because there's always lots of quotas. And as I said, they never talk about quotas for the NBA either, even though that's of course the people who buy the tickets are overwhelmingly white.
They want to see the best players, and the best players, with a few exceptions, are black.
And not to mention that's also another sport where there certainly is a lot of discrimination, because a guy who has the same skills as 6 foot tall versus a guy who has the same skills at 7 foot tall, the guy who's 6 foot tall loses. And there's there's height prejudice, definitely.
No doubt. No doubt.
It's not conscious, but and there's certainly been some short guys who really worked their butts off. But and they were very well respected too. Yeah.
The late great Bobby Knight, who coached at Indiana for a number of years and won a bunch of national championships, said it very nicely. He said, he said, when somebody asked, what about the little man? And Bobby Knight said, let the little man play second base. Basketball is a big man sport. And so you're absolutely right. Height matters. But anyway, you want the best. You want the best. Another book that I've often recommended to people is Dr. Ben Carson's autobiography, Gifted Hands.
Yeah.
And I disagree with Dr. Carson on his religious views and all kinds of things. But overwhelmingly, he was an innovator in the field of brain surgery for children. Right? And he's brilliant, did brilliant work in that field. He's innovative, and he's talking about there was one couple, I think it's when he was at Johns Hopkins, didn't want him to operate on their child because they didn't want a black guy operating on their child. And the head of neurosurgery, I don't remember, it's a while since I read his book, but head of neurosurgery said, well, something like, do you want a white guy operating on your child, or do you want the best guy, operated on your child? Because Dr. Carson is the best guy. And most people are going to opt for having the best guy operate on their child's brain rather than a white guy. And so, I think most people are sufficiently rational to recognize that. And certainly we've discussed all along, the diminution of white racism in this country. And of course, Dr. Carson had a brilliant career in brain surgery.
Yeah, there's been a lot of amazing stories like that too. Go back and think about, Elijah McCoy with the lubricator cap. Mm-hmm. Which was the origin of the term, is it a real McCoy?
You're right. Yeah, Elijah McCoy, Black American, from Michigan, right? And a great inventor. Yes. Yeah, there were a number of great stories like that. You're right. Sarah Breedlove.
Carver.
But Sarah Breedlove, Madam C.J. Walker, may well be the first self-made female millionaire of any race. She was born a slave, I think, in Louisiana. So there's a lot of stories. The more capitalist the country is, the more it honors individual rights, and the self-made man, Frederick Douglass's brilliant speech and essay on that, the more we'll see the rise of Black American men and women, like more Ben Carson's, George Washington Carver's, Booker T. Washington, Sarah Breedlove, Madam C.J. Walker, Duke Ellington, and all kinds of geniuses like that, and not just geniuses, but people in every field. Marva Collins, as a college professor.
Yes.
Marva Collins, one of my all-time heroines. She's just a brilliant teacher. And I strongly recommend to your audience, Chris, the movie they made about her life, the Marva Collins story. I know Morgan Freeman was in. Who played Cicely Tyson, right?
Cicely Tyson. I think it was the Marva Collins Way, actually. But yes, I have seen that movie. Although it was a long time ago. It was a TV movie.
Yeah, and it's very good.
Yeah,
I rewatched it just a year or two ago. It's very good. It's very inspiring. Yeah. And Marva Collins, one of the great teachers one of the great educators in American history. So in a free country, you see the rise of minority members who historically were persecuted. And I think one thing I want to say, there's no question that American history shows the brutal injustices perpetrated on blacks, slavery, yes. Jim Crow, lynchings. It's horrific.
And also, our indigenous Americans. I mean, prejudice in some cases. Prejudices against Asians on the West Coast. In the that was really what motivated some of the first immigration laws and.
Yeah, the yellow peril, the yellow peril, right? That yellow peril mentality. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The fact that there was just such horrible Italian prejudice for a long time. And that's pretty much gone. Yeah, and Irish. I do wonder sometimes if that was really anti-Catholic prejudice, but
to some extent it was. Yeah. But so go back to my booklet here, American Racism, Its Decline, Its Baleful Resurgence, and Our Looming Race War. One thing I learned from Ayn Rand that I wrote on in the booklet is, see the big picture, integrate, go as broad as we can. And so you look at racism around the world, because the leftists claim, it's all white people and mostly white Americans. There's a technical term for that claim in the field of philosophy, Chris, and it's called bullshit. If you look around the world, the endless racial persecutions, whether it was the Rwandan genocide in 1994, or the Armenian genocide in Turkey and the Ottoman Empire in 1915, or the Bengali genocide that almost nobody remembers in 1971, out of which the country of Bangladesh was formed. At least 1.5 million ethnic Bengalis slaughtered by the Pakistani regime, possibly as many as 3 million. We can go on and on with this. The rape of Nanking in China in World War II. How did Japanese soldiers perpetrate these kinds of atrocities? Well, to a significant degree, as they were kids coming through the school system, they were taught that the Chinese were subhuman, they were no better than pigs, and so on and so forth. This is a worldwide problem. I can give 25 other examples or more. This is a worldwide problem. But notice something here. In the United States, we've made, and it's the United States has been the seething contradiction on this, because you had the individualistic principles of the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, and the individualistic principles of the Bill of Rights written by James Madison, a slave owner. And we condemn them properly for that, but they did a lot of great things the Virginians did a lot of great things in their careers. But the point is, the reason the civil rights movement in the United States, and again, I want to go back to Confucius, who said a long time ago that the beginning of wisdom is to see to it that things are called by their right names. The civil rights movement is really the individual rights movement for non-white Americans, and long overdue. And the reason it's made so much progress, and you see the rise of an affluent, educated black middle class, you see black candidates elected to the presidency. Tim Scott's been elected twice to the U.S. Senate from South Carolina, the cradle of the Confederacy. There's a lot of evidence supporting the claim that black Americans have made great advances and that anti-black racism in this country has diminished significantly. How and why? Well, the principle of individual rights that the country was founded on is still, maybe on life support, but it's still alive in American culture. And why is it wrong to lynch an innocent black man or woman? Because an individual has an inalienable right to his own life, so forth. Whereas in other parts of the world, you have massive slavery in Sudan, right? It's an Islamic, black slavery. It's a Islamic nation, and Islam under Sharia law, you can't enslave other Muslims, but everybody else, infidels are fair game. Everybody else is fair game. And these black slaves in Sudan are Christian or animists, polytheists.
Yeah.
There's no principle of individual rights in the cultural heritage. The human rights movement, so far has failed abysmally to free the slaves, and similarly in North Korea, the brutal totalitarian state, as we speak right now, is thousands and thousands and thousands of people enslaved in the gulags, who are innocent of any crime, including little kids who weren't even born there, and there's no principle of individual rights there. There's no foothold for a human rights movement to be able to liberate the prisoners and protect the rights of these innocent people. The principle of individual rights matters. It's the fountainhead, historically and philosophically, of an abolitionist movement, and that's why we've been able to make progress in the United States on opposing racism. Traditional white racism, whereas these other parts of the world have not made any progress. And the problem, of course, is, again, the left controls the intellectual culture. The solution to racism in any form, rationally, is colorblind individualism. But the left rejects that. They call it a microaggression. It's called a microaggression. I just perpetrated a microaggression by advocating colorblind individualism. But we made a lot of progress on the traditional racism.
We've certainly made a lot of progress. I mean, as compared to in the last 50 years. I mean, you're older than I am, so you've seen some progress.
Oh yeah, I can remember George Wallace. When I was a kid, governor of Alabama, fulminating at the state capitol with big Confederate flag behind him. And, he's hollering, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That was 60 years ago. I mean, if you said that today, you would be canceled in a New York second, and I don't believe in cancel culture, but somebody like that should be answered immediately by a storm of rational arguments against racism, just like these anti-white racists should be answered.
Well, the most effective people are people like Daryl Davis.
Oh yeah, he's a hero.
Yeah, I mean, he's a real American hero. Yeah,
I
collect hoods. I am curious to know how many people does he attempt that with, and how many? What is his percentage of success? I would like to know that, because.
Yeah, for 3 years at the Objective Standard Institute, I was part of the Hero Show. First year with John Hersey, and for the last 2 years with Robert Begley. And John and I interviewed Daryl Davis on the Hero Show. And for people who don't know who Daryl Davis is, he's a Black American musician. He's played with some, big, B.B. King, I believe, and Jerry Lee Lewis. People who are big stars. And he tells a story. He was playing in a bar, or and I think he lives in Maryland, and some guy comes up to him, some white guy comes up to him afterwards and talks to him, and they really like the music, and you're really good and everything. Turns out the guy's a member of the Klan, and Daryl Davis befriends him over a period of time, and the guy realizes from his relationship with Davis, and maybe amongst other reasons, hey, he's a black guy. He's a really good guy. These racist principles are really irrational. And he quits the Klan. And I think he gave, his hood and his robe to Daryl Davis. Anyway, he has befriended, and he risked his life in some cases, because some of these guys are violent. The Klans are not just a racist organization. They're a violent racist organization. He's befriended any number of Klansmen. I think he said something like 200, who he's convinced, by friendship with him,
Yeah.
that racism is irrational. They left the Klan.
I'm just wondering how many does he approach? I suspect he doesn't succeed with everybody, but
no, you can't succeed with everybody.
Yeah,
some people are just too irrational to be reached.
yeah.
But that he's reached possibly 200 members of the Klan.
Oh, yeah.
That's extraordinary and courageous. So he's done something very, very life affirming, facing perhaps life threatening obstacles to do so. So that's why I certainly think Daryl Davis is a hero.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because if you want to, I guess strictly speaking, it's not a 100% American tragedy, but the greatest murder of African Americans was at Jonestown.
Was it Jonestown? You said?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean Jim Jones? You mean?
Yeah, Jim Jones.
Yeah.
I mean that was something like 600 or 700, and he was the great anti-racist.
Yeah.
It's interesting how socialism ends up killing them. It's
Jim Jones. If people don't remember, what was that? It was late 70s, maybe
77, 78, something like that. Yeah,
he was a
commune of about 900 people, and going to try
Jim
to be
Jones
this utopia.
Who combined
the people's
some elements, some elements of Christianity with elements of Marxism.
Yeah,
right? And they murdered a congressman, and I forget. And the hand of the law was going to come down on them, so he convinced all of his followers to drink the Kool-Aid laced with cyanide.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, part of the reason why he broke from a lot of the mainstream churches is they were still bigoted, and there were definitely some churches that were there were basically whites only. In fact, it's still kind of that way, really. Unfortunately, that there's still a lot of segregation in the churches, unfortunately.
Yeah, is that right? I didn't even know that. Yeah, I mean, but I've been arguing for.
Well, it's not done intentionally. It's just you go to church where your mom and dad went to church, and they go to church where mom and dad went to church, so it's never really come together yet.
Right. Yeah, no, I've been arguing for a long time, continuing that white racism in this country has diminished significantly and is still diminishing, but there's still progress to be made. There's still a ways to go. Without a doubt. But we made great progress, especially when we contrast it with some of these other countries around the world, where the different atrocities, race-based slavery in North Africa, totalitarianism in the communist countries, and so on and so forth. We made substantial progress, but there's still a ways to go. But the good news is that the panacea for any form of racism, whether we hate white people or blacks or Asians or Jews or whatever it is, the panacea, the cure is colorblind individualism.
Yeah.
Has to recognize skin color doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, tribe doesn't matter, moral character matters. And that's based on people's choices. It's not something that's hardwired into their biology by birth.
It also seems to come from, an attitude of zero-sum thinking. That there's only so much food to go around. There's only so much housing to go around. There's only so much. It's like we're limited. It's you see more race. I think you see more racism when everybody's poor than when everybody's rich and everybody's doing well.
Yeah, that's I think that's probably true. I haven't thought about it in that way, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
Hitler
doesn't take over Germany without the Depression,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is true, and we see this terribly disturbing resurgence of Jew hatred in the world today, and including in the United States. And I think the good news with I'm seeing and hearing
Yeah.
with the virulent hatred of Jews that's being spewed out on college campuses and and so forth. The good news is here we're getting intellectual pushback. There's a lot of people responding, no, this is irrational hatred and so on. Whereas I'm not here. I want to see the same. I mean, that's good, but I want to see the same regarding the hatred spewed at white people.
Yeah.
But it's good at least that we're getting a lot of people, not just Jews, but Protestants, Catholics, people who are not religious at all, speaking out. No, this hatred of Jews is irrational. Just stop. It's good that we're seeing voices raised to answer it. And I think I might write an essay. Talk to Craig Biddle at the Objective Standard about writing an essay for them on the anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, as to your point about poverty, as a barometer of envy in a society.
Yeah.
Because in the last, especially in the United States, which is another topic for an essay, that the greatest thing to happen in 3,800 years of Jewish history was the creation of the United States of America. And here James Madison again gets propers because he wrote the principle of religious freedom right into the First Amendment, and it's been a charter of liberation for the Jews in America. And I think American Jews, at 3,800 years, I think this is true, in general, are the most educated by far and the most affluent by far Jews of history. And I think some of the, historically, the anti-Semitism was grounded in religious fervor. They killed the accusation they killed Jesus, or Martin Luther emphasized they reject Jesus.
Yeah.
Today, I think, is more envy. The culture stresses education. You see a lot of Jews are educated, doing well, and there are a lot of people who hate, who hate to see that. Maybe is it more amongst poverty classes than amongst affluent classes? Maybe it is. I'm not sure. Your point on this may be. Yeah, I've heard a number of people who are relatively poor claim the Jews control the country, the Jews run the country, the Jews run the the economy and so on and so forth.
Well, even going back to Nazi Germany, there were plenty of German scientists who were happy to see those Jewish scientists getting kicked out of their jobs. It's sad but true, and it was they, and of course they end up kicking out Einstein. That was
and a lot of Did you see the recent film Oppenheimer?
I have not seen Oppenheimer. I should.
Well, there's it's worth seeing. Well, it's very long. It's like 3 hours long or close to it.
Yeah.
But there's a scene where Robert, Oppenheimer is talking to, I think, Leslie Groves, the Army general who runs the program at Los Alamos, and how if it was Leslie Groves or somebody else says to Oppenheimer, about the attempt to build the first atomic bomb, that the Nazis are like a year ahead of us in this, and Oppenheimer says a year and a half. He says, but we have an advantage, and the other guy says, what's that? And Oppenheimer said, anti-Semitism. Because all these Jewish scientists fled Germany, and Europe more broadly to come to the United States, and a number of them, contributed significantly to the Manhattan Project. And so, you're right. You're right. I suppose the German scientists who were, didn't have these high-level jobs because some of these brilliant Jewish scientists had them. We're glad to see them flee the Nazis so they can move upwards into those positions. But you always see this kind of envy. I mean, communism is just the whole philosophy is a philosophy of envy, and hatred of the successful. But we saw it in the Armenian genocide too. The Turks, they told the people, these Armenians, they're not Muslims, they're not Turks, and they're making all this money, they're profiteering off the blood, sweat, and tears of good Muslims. The same thing that Hitler and the Nazis said about the Jews in Germany.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that Hitler actually modeled what he did after Ataturk, but also we can certainly point to something more recent going on with Armenia as well.
What?
With Azerbaijan.
Oh yeah. Yeah, now that
that's happening right now. Yeah, they're.
Yeah, And unfortunately, well, it's funny. My students don't have any idea what Armenia is, and we don't have maps in the classroom anymore. So I wish we did. But your point,
Yeah.
I could point to the Caucasus regions. Armenia is here, Georgia is here, Azerbaijan is here. And there's a war. The Armenia is Orthodox Christian. Azerbaijan is Islamic, and war between. Unfortunately, the Israelis have sided with Azerbaijan, in this conflict, which is disappointing. But and they've also supported, international power politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
To have the support of Turkey, one of the few Islamic countries that doesn't want to blow Israel off the face of the earth, they've accepted the Turks' lie that the Armenian genocide never happened. So you would like to see a country founded in large part by Holocaust survivors stand up morally and say, no, the Armenian genocide definitely happened. The Turkish version is, well, they rebelled during World War I and they were killed in warfare. 1 to 1.5 million civilians you killed in warfare, including women, little kids, babies, pregnant women. I don't think so.
Yeah. There's so much. There's a lot of people do not realize how complex the Caucasus region is. All the different languages and groups and religions and cultures there. I mean, if you thought the breakup of Yugoslavia was complicated, it's 3 or 4 times as many different groups there.
The Caucasus region, Georgia. Joseph Stalin came from Georgia, right? Perhaps Georgia doesn't want to claim him anymore.
They really don't, and do not ever call them Russians.
Or the Ukrainian.
Well, I was in Tbilisi, August last year. I don't think I saw a city with more Ukrainian flags. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and since I got
speaking of all these atrocities, we were talking about racial atrocities. The Armenian genocide in Rwanda, and the Bengali genocide in Pakistan, but it's not just about race. Race war. We should discuss class war too. The communists, the Nazis fight race war. The communist class war is just as deadly, just as evil, and the Holodomor, for example, or Holodomor. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but most of my
Ukrainian
students,
genocide.
the Ukrainian terror famine in 1932, 33, when Stalin deliberately starved to death. Nobody even knows how many millions of Ukrainians. I've seen estimates
6 or 7 million.
4 million to 8 million.
There was something similar in Kazakhstan too, although it doesn't get quite as much attention. But
is it also deliberately done by Stalin?
Same area. It was collectivization, trying to change people's lifestyles and things like that. Nomadic farmers.
Kazakhstan, that's a lot, and the population would be largely Islamic. Right?
I think Kazakhstan is a very sparsely populated country, though. It's much bigger than Ukraine, but it has a lot less people than Ukraine. I mean,
okay, all right.
I think a lot of it might be desert. I've not been there, but
all right. But anyhow,
that's also one of the longest borders in the world. The border between Russia and Kazakhstan now.
Okay. No, I didn't. Yeah, you don't hear much about Kazakhstan in the news. That's for sure. But certainly, we could say with 100% certainty that the class war of the communists has been at least as murderous as the race war of the Nazis. Millions and millions, and also related to the Jew hatred and the point about envy is Marxism is an institutionalization of envy. I mean, the philosophy is a philosophy of, for, and by, envy-riddled, psychopathological wannabe mass murderers. There's this, we'll take out the owning class. Under the Tsar, it's very possible that the owning class, have become so by aristocratic privilege and brutally oppressed the serfs. That's probably true. But under capitalism, as Ayn Rand pointed out brilliantly, no. Now, under capitalism, the Frederick Douglass's self-made man
Yes.
is, Andrew Carnegie, famous example, many others, is prevalent. People who've created wealth, created prosperity by the wealth they created. But the Marxists hate them all uniformly, will expropriate all their property and kill them. So yeah, it's a philosophy of psychopaths, and that's who controls the intellectual culture in the United States today, and is spewing out this hatred of white people for the purposes that I was discussing at the top of the show.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, and we were both pretty knowledgeable at the time. When the Berlin Wall came down, we didn't think we'd still be fighting this now.
No, that's right.
Yeah, it makes no sense because it's as if the college professors never got the word about the Berlin Wall coming down, or it's.
Well, I've heard leftist professors say in so many words, the wrong side won the Cold War.
Yeah,
they support the Soviets.
At this point,
let me tell you something, Chris, and everybody. So that was the fall of 1989, right? Spring of 1990, a few months later, I'm teaching in Hunter College, teaching logic classes, Hunter College in New York City. And I'm walking down the stairwell, one day, and there was elections, in Germany, and first free elections, God knows how long, and a big posters up there: support the GDR, support the German Democratic Republic, vote communists, and everything. I was like, my God, what was that joke? It's not funny, but post collapse of the Soviet Empire in 1989. The joke was that the only place where Marxist professors can now be hired is in the American universities. They lost the Cold War, but they won the battle to control the American universities and school system. And we see the result. They're churning out, their propaganda machine churns out thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of little leftists every year.
This, Andrew, this doesn't seem to just be an American problem, though. I hear it's a problem just as much in South America, and it's a problem in Europe. And I don't know if it's a problem in in the former Warsaw Pact countries.
But, I don't think it is as much.
But because they had it forced down their throats. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
And of course, because it was forced on them, they see it as something that was foreign. I've heard that. Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, so, I taught for a year in Bulgaria, at the American University in Bulgaria, 2016 to 17. My students were really good students, and they had no use for communism. They were some leftists, but much less so than American college students generally.
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering: is this? We're now kind of thinking: is this ever going to die?
Well, it's a philosophic battle, and so the only good news in this is, I think, is that Ayn Rand's intellectual achievements armed the supporters of liberty, of individual rights and liberty, with a philosophy, with novels that are the greatest novels in world literature. I think that as long as people can still read, which may not be that much longer in many cases, are brilliant novels that also serve as in their own right, also serve secondarily as an introduction to Ayn Rand's philosophy. But Rand's philosophic achievements make it possible for the good guys to stand up against the German philosophy that dominates the intellectual culture, Kant, Hegel, and Marx. But right now we are way behind. I mean, if this was I'm a big baseball fan. If this was a baseball game, we're losing 48-0 in the ninth inning, and Mariano Rivera came in to close the game. We're in we're in bad shape, philosophically and culturally. But at least we're armed. We're intellectually armed to the teeth with objectivism. We have the intellectual weapons. Ayn Rand gave the moral defense of capitalism. The economists have proven beyond any shadow of a doubt, from Adam Smith to Milton Friedman, von Mises and Hazlitt, that capitalism and private ownership, not socialism, is the means to create prosperity. We have the moral, philosophic, and economic ammunition, but the bad guys control the intellectual high ground in the university, which is a whole question in itself. How did that happen? But it did, and we have a hell of a philosophic and cultural struggle ahead of us to defeat Marxists.
I do think, and it worries me too. And one thing we haven't got into too, and what worries me is it's not racism, but there's certainly a growing hatred toward immigrants in this country, and that really I find that, and I've even seen that from people who I'd consider otherwise good objectivists.
Yeah, there's a xenophobia. Yeah. I think my longtime friend Harry Binswanger put it. Objectivist philosophy professor put it. That's just a polite term for racism, which I think, at least in some cases, is true. There's the conundrum with the southern border. Is like most Latino immigrants always have been and still are hardworking, honest people who come here because they want a better life for themselves and their kids, and that's the American dream, and that should be rewarded and praised. I don't know, but if the border's wide open and there's no vetting of immigrants, how many criminals, drug gangs, jihadists, other form of terrorists, crossing the border? I don't know. I'd like to see an official immigration policy in the United States that's more welcoming, like it was in the past, for honest people. But I also want to vet the immigrants, and especially from the Arab Islamic world, because some subset of those support jihad.
Well, a lot of the immigrants from Venezuela and Cuba end up becoming really great capitalists.
Latino immigrants tend to be overwhelmingly hardworking, honest, productive people. Yes, who come here for all the right reasons.
And I've also like to say, wherever immigrants go from where to ever where they love to open restaurants.
Often good ones.
I mean, I saw that when I was in Mongolia, and I saw these Korean restaurants. The North Koreans get out of China, the Chinese don't treat them very well, so they end up going to Mongolia, and there's all these Korean restaurants in Ulaanbaatar.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I read Yeonmi Park's book. About what it was like for her and her mother escaping from North Korea into China, and the sex traffickers and the brutal mistreatment of these North Korean women was just horrible.
Yeah, one thing I've heard too, though, in Mongolia, for example, if they end up deporting them, they send them to South Korea. So maybe that's what the North Koreans really want, anyways. But because that border is so militarized. I guess it's. I don't know of any stories of North Koreans crossing into South Korea, but
that's enormously difficult. And
I don't know if it makes a difference, but Mongolia is the lowest population density in the world. I mean,
is that right?
It's got the same population in Utah, and it's 7 times the land area.
How much of it is the Gobi Desert? Is it how much of it?
I think a lot of it is, but half the people live in Ulaanbaatar. But maybe there's this attitude too. Hey, we've got all this space. Sure, come on in.
Well, the Israelis, built up the desert into a flourishing, country, and the Americans did it in the Imperial Valley in California. So maybe the Mongolians can do the same. And by the way.
Yeah.
So my year in Bulgaria, some of the students were from Mongolia. I'm not sure why they came all the way to Bulgaria to go to school, but these Mongolian kids, the administration told me before I ever taught a class there, they tend to be outstanding students. And in my experience, they were right. These Mongolian kids were really hardworking, smart kids, and they did really well. English was very good. The writing. From the Bulgarian kids, kids from Eastern Central Europe, Ukraine, Russia, the kids from Mongolia, they're written English. Sadly, happily for them, tend to be very good. Sadly for the American kids, these foreign kids for whom English is a second language, their writing is very often better than the American kids, which is a real indictment of the American school system. One of many we can make.
I think it would make a difference if if more Americans were learning languages at younger ages too.
I think I think it would help.
Because
By the way, Chris.
yeah.
By the way, Chris, do you have any objection if I discuss my my
Oh
novel
yeah,
on race
sure,
war?
yeah. Bring up your novel. Yeah, we need more good novels out there. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Chris. This is the title is Reckoning, and you can see I always struggle getting it up, for the camera.
Yeah.
Reckoning, race war comes to America, and it's about race war. So it's violent. Is the one. I want to be very clear for prospective readers if you buy it from Amazon. Uh, um, and maybe you could link to that in the notes.
Yeah. I
But
usually just link to the author page in my notes, just so that way it goes to all the books.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
The book's about race war, so it is a violent story. So if some people, I understand, they just they don't tolerate violence. So just a warning up front. But for the people who can tolerate violence, I could tell you this right here. It's a hell of a story with a powerful theme of colorblind individualism versus racism in different forms, and takes place in Brooklyn, turn of the 20th century. They say Chris, they say the writer's question is, what if? And it occurred to me years ago, what if some Nazi war criminal tried to hide by converting to Judaism, becoming a rabbi, and ministering to a Jewish flock? That would be a good place, a good way to hide from Nazi hunters. And that's what the story's about. And this guy, Marco Winehouse, who's his forged name, he's a militant Jewish rabbi in Brooklyn. It's based on the old Crown Heights conflict between Orthodox Jews and blacks in the late 1980s, early 90s. If you remember, Maya Kahane was a militant rabbi, formed the Jewish Defense League. To some degree, they defended Jews against black criminals, but they were also brutes themselves, armed with baseball bats, beating black teenagers and stuff. Well, that's this guy. He's got the Maccabees, with his gang of thugs, and so he's a black bashing bigot. And word is leaked to the Israeli embassy and to the consulate in New York City that this guy may be Heinrich Stautten, the Nazi war criminal, the menace of Medachevsky, who performed experiments on moral. He's a philosopher, performed moral experiments on Jews in the death camps at Medachevsky, a fictional camp. There's no such field as experimental moral philosophy, but Stautten in the novel creates it. How much Aryan blood is it necessary, to transform Jews from these inveterate tribe of egoists who are out only for themselves into good Aryans who will sacrifice themselves willingly for the folk, for the people? He's performing these experiments. It's brutal stuff. So the Mossad sends in its top Nazi hunter, Mick Davidson, who's from Brooklyn, in the first place. He's hunting down. He's trying to find evidence as Winehouse a Nazi in the midst of this growing race war in Brooklyn. Because one last character, let me mention, the black nationalist, the main villain in Reckoning, Amiri Bantu Baiko, took his African name. He's American. But Baiko, for anybody who knows Atlas Shrugged, is like a Francisco d'Anconia of evil. He's just this genius. He's better at everything than anybody, at math, at literature. He's a brilliantly successful lawyer, as a boxer. He's a tall, lean, good-looking, charming guy, very charismatic. He's a black nationalist, and he's a Nazi. He's obviously reversed favored and disfavored races, but he holds the essential principle of National Socialism, that race war, not class war of the Marxists, but race war is the driving force of human history. A lot of evidence to support it. And consequently, the only way for the black man to achieve justice against his oppressors is to rise up in revolution and take over the country. Not just, some black country in Africa where you kick out the European colonialists, but take over one of the white homeland nations in North America, or Europe. And there's Baiko fomenting, the black revolution. And then there are heroes. It's not, they're hero. Mick Davidson's a hero. There are heroes here. Jacob Paris, another rabbi who's a Holocaust survivor. and his good buddy James Christian Steele, a Baptist minister. They're colorblind individuals trying to, bring peace between the warring tribes. It's a hell of a plot. I don't want to give it away, but that's the foundation of the story. So that's what the book's about. So Mick Davis is hunting down a Nazi war criminal in the midst of a growing race war. That's what's going on here, and falling in love with Jacob Paris's daughter Giselle, who's a Krav Maga expert and who has her own terrible secrets to hide because her son was murdered by black nationalists, disciples of Baiko. And as a Krav Maga expert, she hunted them down and killed them with her hands. And yet she stands for peace. Krav Maga is a means of the innocent to defend themselves against, violent people. And she's Jacob Paris, who's a pacifist. She's Jacob Paris's daughter. And anyway, there's a lot going on. His love story, there's race war, there's hunt for the Nazi war criminal. It's a hell of a story, Chris, for people who could tolerate violence. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Richard Salzman, the economist professor at Duke, who blurbed the book, so he said, it's dark here. Let me see if I can. He said, if there's now a new genre in fiction, philosophic violence, Bernstein is this great progenitor.
That's a great blurb. It's probably not as long as the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, maybe 50 or 100,000 words, maybe. I don't know.
What, the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, the book's 300 pages. It's not 1,000.
I said 50,000 or 100,000 words. That's
I'm not sure how many. I'm not sure how many words.
With Kindles and everything, that's really a more accurate figure. It's because Atlas Shrugged can be a difference of as much as 100 pages. Depending on how it's formatted, but
How many words is Atlas Shrugged? There must be. Is it a million?
It's over 600,000.
600. Yeah, I think Reckoning is around, like you said. I think it's around 100,000. So it's much smaller.
That's a good. Yeah, that's a fairly standard. That's a good novel. Yeah, it's 50,000 is generally considered the low for a novel. Before that, they call it novellas, novelettes, that kind of thing. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I got to ask, anything to say about what happened in Argentina on Sunday before we go?
Well, I'm no expert on what goes on in South America. I understand the new president. What's his name?
Javier Milei. He is a capitalist.
Yeah, I understand that he's a student of Austrian economics.
Yes, he is,
and that he's libertarian.
Yeah,
and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but that he's outspoken on this, that he's not shy about speaking out against socialism.
Yeah. He's not shy about it all. He talks about, rights are not needs are not rights. And, he likes to say the market never fails. It's two people transacting business. It never fails. I mean, I've talked to people who became free marketers because of Milei.
Good. That's good. So he knows Austrian economics, which is good. Let me ask you something. Has he read Ayn Rand at all? Does he have the philosophy?
I saw him quoting Ayn Rand on his Twitter feed a few times. By the way, this is a cause of mine. Atlas Shrugged, but when it's translated into Spanish, it becomes Rebellion de Atlas. I mean, use it Atlas verb. I mean, there is a word for shrink in Spanish that I think would probably be the best verb to use. But you're completely mistranslating the title, in my opinion. I don't know why they allow that.
No, I just hope they get the content of the novel more accurately. But if the new president, was it Milei? Is that his name? Did he say
Milei? Milei, Milei, yes.
Milei. Yeah, if he's an outspoken supporter of Austrian economics and he knows something about Ayn Rand's philosophy, that the moral vindication of individual rights and capitalism, then I'm very, very glad to see, and I hope Argentina can reverse course, from the abysmal, the misery of a socialist regime, and become a shining light of capitalism in South America, because one, it'll be good for the Argentines, and two, it might be a beacon for other countries in South America and elsewhere in the world on the right direction to go if you care about freedom and prosperity.
Yeah,
so I think this could be a very good thing.
People have told me that South America tends to follow whatever they do, which would be a very good sign, and they really need it. I think they're I love South America. It's so many things that I've been to Colombia. I've been to Peru. Yeah. So, okay. Well, anything else to say before we go?
Well,
Yeah.
just, thanks very much for having me on the show, Chris. It's always a pleasure to talk to you,
It's great. Yeah.
and able to promote my race war novel, Reckoning, and my booklet, American Racism, its decline, its baleful resurgence, and our looming race war. So, as a writer, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to promote my writings, Chris. So thank you very much.
And Andrew has other books and as well as articles out there too. Yeah. Please buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Follow the channel. I'm Chris Baker, and we are out. And I've also got to get some melee shows done. So, yes, we're out.